That's what I'm saying.
I do, well, when we talk about policy, I want to mention a concern that Roseanne brought up, because I think it is a policy consideration about public permission.
Oh,
Yeah. But if we're all in agreement that we can go on Facebook Live tonight, who are in this room, then let's do it.
you're not gonna be public camera on me, I don't care.
Okay, that brings us back up the agenda to Finance Committee. And Brian's not here. Do you have anyone to give a report?
We do,
I could certainly give a report.
at the meeting.
Well, we met in order to analyze the schedule, proposed schedule for 2017. And you guys had asked us to cost out what it costs to be open on a Saturday and a Sunday, such as President's Day weekend, and what it costs to close the library at 6 p.m. on Friday nights, and what the circulation is on Friday nights, and what the foot traffic is on Friday nights. And if I remember correctly, what the committee is recommending is that we be open on the Saturday and Sunday of President's Day weekend, and that we make no other changes to the weekly or yearly calendar, with the exception of, and I will probably need Margaret, but New Year's Eve, I believe, is what it is, right?
Well, no, yeah, you're right.
New Year's Eve is a Sunday, and we would normally be open 1 to 5, but because we close at 2, we don't want to be open from 1 to 2.
For 2017.
For New Year's Eve 2017, yep, so, which is the day before 2018 starts. So,
Do we need that part of this resolution?
Well, I think we have the entire 2017 calendar to be approved.
Yeah, we never, because we deferred it last month.
Right.
The entire calendar year?
yeah, it's in your packet.
2017.
He was last next to that.
So the only change is that President's Day weekend would now be open Saturday and Sunday and closed Monday, February 20th. And then there's that change on New Year's Eve. And I don't think there are any other changes. Why we chose President's Day?
Is that it's closed.
Sure.
It's closed.
Right.
We're closed all day, it's a Sunday.
Barbara is saying
Closing
that,
at 2 o'clock.
reminding me that the reason the committee chose to be open to recommend being open on President's Day weekend is that we want to see if people want to use the library. I have only had 2 or 3 complaints about 3-day weekends in the nearly 3 years that I've been here, but 2 were about President's Day. I don't think anybody, expects you to be open on Labor Day weekend or Memorial Day weekend. But President's Day weekend strikes people as a little odd that we take 3 days off. And I gather that it's about a 4 or 5-year-old practice that was adopted in part to save utility money. I'm certainly willing to try being open.
Tim, my notes reflect that at the Finance Committee meeting, we estimated what the approximate cost of doing that was.
Right, we did. It was, wasn't it about $2,000 a day, labor-wise?
I thought it was free pay for
weekend.
the whole weekend.
Free pay for the whole weekend?
Yeah.
3K for the weekend.
Yeah, so.
For the 2-day weekend.
Right.
That's the 2 days.
Yep. And then, the basis of the other decision to not close on Friday nights was that basically about, as much as 10% of our daily activity, both in foot traffic and circulation, is happening between 6 and 9. It does seem dead when you're in here, but the door counter and the door counter does kind of lie, just because
It's kind of people leaving, right?
it counts people going either way. Plus, there's a lot of, people go outside to get something from their car or whatever. But, and there's a lot of staff walking back and forth. But the circulation, if you're checking something in or out, you were here, and it was substantial enough on Friday nights. Plus, we didn't want to lose the First Friday family movies, which we did note that we could do even with the rest of the library closed. but we think that there's a significant number of parents who come, put the kid in there, maybe mom stays in while dad uses the library, and then they switch off, you know. So we just weren't ready to recommend, and by we, I mean the board committee, not me, but we weren't ready to recommend Friday night closures. We also considered closing at 8 p.m. every weeknight, but there's a pretty significant percentage of our use, 12 to 15%, is between 8 and 9 p.m. And so we think we should stay open. We thought about students who have work to do, need a place to do it.
We also had a question for them to look at the possibility of, or the impact, to opening earlier.
Sounds good.
If we can stagger work hours so that we can open an hour earlier, we think that would be beneficial to the community.
Though we did not end up recommending that, correct?
No, you were gonna put us
A proposal,
a proposal over
which if I remember right, we said we'd have to give you next year because we have to approve a calendar.
right, it wouldn't be for the next year after, but we can start looking at it over the next several months and try to examine it.
Well, does anybody have any more comments about that proposal of President's Day Saturday and Sunday and closing for 1 hour New Year's Eve of 2017, which is not this upcoming?
Basically, we'd be closed. Yeah.
Well, we're resolving to close 1 hour, right?
No.
Yeah, oh, to the public, yeah.
Because our contract already requires us to
Because we're
close
already
at 2, right?
That's the change.
Yeah.
We're already closed except for 1 hour.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Does anyone, unless someone has any more comments, does anyone have a resolution to make on
I
this?
make a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
I'm gonna second, and thank you for doing the work, the finance committee and to Margaret, to keep this open a little bit longer than we have in the past. And it's a good move to try.
Move in the right direction.
We'll try it, yeah.
Okay, Jen,
So that's Chris and,
Chris and
Chris and
Judy.
You put Judy first.
no, there's a pattern here.
And the motion was the President's Day Saturday and Sunday and New Year's Eve 2017, 1 hour.
the motion was
Wait,
Wait,
what?
wait, isn't it the whole
the
calendar?
calendar as
day.
presented, which,
Well, we could package that into the motion too. Is that what you're asking?
we're just moving to accept the calendar as presented, which included those things.
Yeah.
Oh, we have to pass that whole thing anyway?
Yes,
Ah,
yes.
Okay, that
Sorry.
simplifies it.
Yeah,
You want to
yeah.
amend your motion then?
That's what I said.
Yeah,
All right.
we got it.
All right.
Okay.
The motion is to approve the
Yeah.
proposed calendar that's been
Yes.
distributed to the board.
And did the finance committee discuss anything else? I can't remember. I think we just dealt with the.
We just discussed Dan.
Yeah, oh, we did discuss
Yeah.
Dan's departure.
And
as
we
it was
discussed
2 days
what
after.
Dave Gilliam was offering to do,
Right.
how much he would pay.
Right,
Yes.
right, yep, so.
So we had a motion and we had a second, but I didn't ask for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous.
Just as a point of order, we've already reached 68 people, just saying.
I'm one of them. I'm watching us.
A little feedback loop there.
It's about a 6-second delay.
Yeah.
So maybe you're about 6.
Okay, Judy, policy.
Okay. Policy, I'm gonna say, we are going to talk about the employee handbook today, which is the only policy that we're gonna be asked to approve tonight. In the coming weeks, we're going to be looking at a social media policy that Mark mentioned. I also want the policy committee to look into the issues related to streaming and whether there's any kind of permission required of people in the public, because I'm not so sure that just by walking into our doors, does a member of the public give tacit approval to be filmed. So we'll look into that. And we're also going to ask the board to reapprove the policies related to smoking, proctoring, the bulletin board notices, and recycling, which probably do not require any updating. But, and then also, next on the agenda after that will be a very close look at our meeting room policy together with a program policy that's being proposed. They kind of go hand in hand. And tomorrow, Jenna, Tim, and I are going to be attending a webinar on the legal aspects of a meeting room policy, of which there are many, that surprised me, but that we have to take into account when we revise our meeting room policy. So the employee handbook, the copy that you all received tonight is the copy that is the draft that has been approved by our attorneys and has been approved by both bargaining units. The only changes that we made to this handbook was the inclusion of something that now is required by regulations promulgated by the Division of New York State Division of Human Rights, which means that in our provisions related to discrimination, among the basis of factors that we cannot discriminate about are those related to gender identity, which I don't think we got in these because it was a late addition, but did we? Oh, okay.
We did.
Okay. Well, they are. Okay, we'll make sure that so gender identity has been included as a basis upon which there can be no discrimination or harassment. The reason why this went back to the policy committee was because there was a question about the inclusion of the provision, which is now numbered 28.15, and it is weapons. And I should say it's a threshold matter. This committee, the policy committee met a couple of weeks ago. There are 4 people on our policy committee, one of whom has been absent and was not responsive at all about attendance. Another person indicated that they would attend and in fact did not attend, so there was myself and one other trustee in attendance. So we came to consensus, but I don't know that I can actually say that the policy committee approved the recommendations because we had no quorum. But there was a consensus that was arrived between the 2 trustees and Tim and Margaret. And the reason why we have decided that we came to consensus on including the weapons provision, which is 2815, is because, first of all, this is what was approved by our attorneys and by the 2 bargaining units. It also is consistent with our old employee handbook. It also is consistent with the code of conduct, which applies to the staff and employees, and we thought that consistency was important. It also was based upon a recommendation from the Guilderland Police Department that I'm trying to find my notes here. When asked, and I'm not quoting exactly, and I wasn't even involved in the conversation, but when asked, the person from the Guilderland Police Department felt that not prohibiting weapons causes more problems than solutions. As the police officer stated, and I'm paraphrasing, we are trained to go in and shoot the person with the gun. We believe that having this weapons prohibition limits our liability in the event of a weapons-related incident involving an employee in the library. And lastly, we did not want any employee to feel responsible for the safety of anyone in the library. If there's concerns about safety in this library, then we need to look really closely at hiring a full-time law enforcement official or safety enforcement official. So that's why we came to consensus on this employee handbook by including the gender identity language and retaining the weapons clause. And we looked at everything else, we compared to the extent we could, the old employee handbook with this employee handbook, and this is what we're suggesting be approved tonight.
Judy, was there any thought to changing the provision to say, no employee is allowed to have any weapon of any kind.
Yeah, what about like off-duty officers or something like that?
Well, this only relates to employees, so, I mean, we can certainly say employees. However, this is an employee handbook, this doesn't apply to
Well,
anyone else.
The reason why I say that,
Okay.
the second sentence says, anyone aware of a potential violation of the no weapons policy should contact the administration. So I don't know if that's talking about employees or anybody in the library
We
period.
can make it really clear that this applies to employees, that's perfectly fine. And we can make it clear that both statements apply to employees, certainly we can do that.
Although as an employee handbook, it
You
shouldn't
would
be
think
read
it
by
would, but
anyone.
But the way it's
No,
stated,
if you
it's
want
just,
it,
no
it's
weapons
fine.
of any kind are permitted on the library
Fine.
premises, you know what I mean? I just think it's better to be
that,
real clear that it's specifically pertaining to employees.
Mhm.
And the other question is, if you have an employee who's here obviously working,
mhm.
but then is able to carry at some point in time and they're off duty, are they still allowed to be on the property even though they
You know, well, I think, so we have two policies, both of which say the same thing.
Mhm.
But one policy applies specifically and exclusively to employees. The other policy can be read to apply to both patrons and employees. Okay,
And that's the
There's a-
code of conduct.
there is, this is
That one is
not a
called what?
contract.
What's the policy that applies to both patrons and employees?
The-
What's the title of it?
Conduct, the
Code of conduct, I think.
code of conduct.
Code of conduct, yes, okay.
Employee handbooks are not contracts, and neither is any code of conduct that we have. I would like to think that the director and assistant director and other people in charge use good judgment when it comes to deciding when there's a violation of either an employee handbook or a code of conduct. And if in your judgment, there's no violation based upon circumstances, then there's no violation based upon circumstances.
Barbara?
I'm the one that has problems with this, and I raised it real early when we first got the thing. I have spoken to a state trooper who was involved with pistol permits and all that, and he did a lot of research, and he said there is nothing to prohibit the library from allowing people who are trained and can carry to be on the premises.
You mean there's no law prohibiting it?
Exactly.
There is no law prohibiting it. And there's also no,
Exactly.
according to Chris Chant, there's no law prohibiting us from banning weapons.
Right.
It's our choice what to do.
Right, and my problem with this is that, you know, if you have, in this day and age, when places like this, schools, nursing homes, malls are soft targets, there have been a number of instances where someone who is trained to carry, be it an off-duty policeman or someone who's just an ordinary everyday citizen, has saved a lot of lives. And nobody would, in my mind, nobody that is an employee would be forced to carry if they didn't want to. But if they wanted to, you know, it would seem to me that we shouldn't prohibit their rights to carry. If they are trained, they have the permits, the proper permits. So I struggle with this because I see what you're saying. But on the other hand, it's a different day and age than it was in the old days. And, you know, at minimum, I would want this clarified, because like an off-duty policeman or whatever that's here, even though this is an employee policy, if something were to happen and it says no weapons of any kind are permitted on the library's premises, some lawyer's gonna look at that and say, well, you know, why were we here, and that type of thing.
A lot of my reasoning anyway, was the liability to the library. And if we have an employee carrying a weapon, even though they're legally permitted to carry a weapon under the laws of the state of New York, and there is an accident with that weapon, or even in the course of trying to defend someone else or themselves, there is a bad occurrence, we are potentially liable for that. Also, I worry about, an employee, I assume, and I'm not a law enforcement person, maybe Peter, you can chime in here, that I assume that trained law enforcement personnel undergo different psychiatric or psychological evaluations, have to retain expertise in target shooting. I'm not even using the right language, I'm sure, because it's not my area of expertise. But would that mean that we would require a psychological evaluation of any employee carrying a gun? I think we would have, I don't know how we could enforce an employee trying to go that, but I wouldn't feel comfortable putting other staff, putting the public at risk for an employee who is either not trained or not suited to carry a weapon. And I don't know that that's within our control to ensure that they're properly trained and properly suited.
I agree with Judy that it does cause liability issues if we allow employees to.
And as an employer, I wouldn't want to put that responsibility, either expressed or implied, on any employee who happens to own a weapon. I wouldn't want them to think that part of their duty as an employee is to defend themselves or anyone else with a gun or any other weapon, should there be something happen. If we're that concerned that something could happen, then we should look into hiring some trained personnel to be here all the time. That's, we can do that.
I think the other thing is if we have an employee that speaks out against this and says, look, I'm training, maybe they're ex police officer that's now working in the library, and we decide we want to change this policy, we can change it
We can.
in an instant, so.
And we
It's
can
not a
also,
policy, it's a handbook.
Yeah.
But I think if we were going to allow a weapon, we would need a policy. We would need to have a policy of how they were handled here, where they would be kept, how they would be secured, and why who would use them, when, if there was a danger. How you get 10 people all running out at once to defend some, to take care of something.
Part of our discussion too, and I'm certainly open to hearing what Peter has to say about this, but part of our discussion had to do with our perception that the purpose of concealed carry for individuals in New York State is to defend themselves, not to defend their workplaces. And our understanding is that the training for concealed carry says, hey, you go to work and you're carrying, and an incident happens, your responsibility is to get yourself out of that incident, not to protect anyone. So,
That's correct.
so what, I don't see any purpose to allowing employees to carry concealed because
Purpose would be to say that person's like that.
that one person's like.
Well, if someone comes into a room and they're in the room and they're gonna shoot people in that room, they're gonna try to shoot that person.
Right.
It's not just gonna protect themselves, it's gonna protect whoever else is in the room.
Oh, see, I thought.
Because they're protecting themselves, they are protecting everybody else that's in the room.
We're talking about safety, we don't wanna be a soft target, you're not saying like, hey, we want you to stop anyone, just like, you don't wanna be a soft target, that's why we're talking about these windows, and if someone does have, a gun and there is something that happens, it makes the likelihood of someone surviving, or all of us surviving, a little bit better.
But there's the liability if it actually happens, for the library too. If they, I know when my husband had to carry a gun, he had to go for target practice just about every week. He was constantly being, having to update, make sure that he could handle it correctly. So
Do we have,
it's different than having a permit to carry for
Yeah.
your own
Yeah,
personal
I-
use without being in the workplace.
I think it does open liability for an employee to be walking around with them. The only thing I would like to see is that it specifically mentions an employee in it, just to take away. And then the other thing too is that I think there needs to be clarification on what a weapon is. Because when typically we think of a weapon, we think of, okay, somebody's walking around with a pistol or something like that. But then you have, is a mace considered a weapon? Is a blade, a fishing knife, something like that, so those things just.
That's what, and
You can box
I,
cutters.
and I thought about that, Peter, and I thought perhaps that if we weren't specific, it was going to be a judgment call that would be made by someone in authority. Because, someone carrying a Swiss Army knife, I don't know, that could be a weapon, used as a weapon, or may not be used as a weapon, but I think it depends in part on the circumstances and who's carrying it, and I would hate to either include it or prohibit it, because isn't it a judgment call in some ways?
Sure.
So, if we just say weapons, and then leave it up to the people that we put in charge of ensuring patron employee safety, leave it up to them to determine whether or not.
And I'm not saying that,
You know.
I know currently with the people who are employed here, I would have no concern about
Right.
judgment on their part of
Right.
making the correct decision.
Okay,
But you can't always guarantee
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
So now, here's a hypothetical.
yeah. Mhm.
Let's say you have somebody in management, there's a disagreement with a staff member, and now they say, well, you know what, we're gonna use this policy on this situation. I just think it's better to be specific about what's allowed and what's not allowed.
So, and how would you suggest we be specific?
I'm just saying designate what weapons are, what we consider to be the weapons that you're not
So
allowed to
maybe you
have.
can help us with that
Yeah.
then. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I know, I wanted to address Barbara. To me, I've been an employee here for a long time. I don't think I would want, Bonnie carried a gun and she walked around this building with a gun, that would probably, it's on her, person. I would think patrons would feel uncomfortable.
It's
It's concealed.
You wouldn't even know
You
that
wouldn't
Bonnie
even
has
know.
it. That's the point.
New York is a concealed carry
You can't
state.
go with a gun sticking out your
No,
side.
not even
No.
on that, on your
No.
belt.
Not at all.
No.
No. I mean, I wouldn't want a person that
You
worked
wouldn't
here,
know.
even had it concealed. So then, if it was in his boot,
You wouldn't even know.
you wouldn't even know.
That's the point, though.
No. I mean, I've talked to Tim all the time about safety here, always. I'm always talking, anybody can come in this building. And I'm with Judy, if we have to look at security in terms of, thinking people are gonna carry guns or whatever, then someone should be hired.
But on the other hand, if somebody was out there right now shooting, and somebody had a gun in here, I'd want to be next to that person.
In our church, we have
It's-
3 people who attend who are ex-police officers that carry guns to church, and we're very happy they're there.
But are they designated as the safety officers or
No.
whatever?
No,
We just know that they have concealed weapons. I don't even know where they keep them, I've never seen them.
most of my family members in law enforcement, they carry their weapons with them,
Mhm.
Mhm.
We've gone to youth events where he's been at the youth event. We're happy he's there. I mean, he's an ex-police officer.
That's the point. It's carry concealed. You're not advertising it.
Nobody knows.
You don't
except
even
for a few
know.
people.
But-
Nobody knows.
Again, we're talking about the employee.
Yeah, this is an
right?
employee.
Okay,
These are
okay.
just,
So I hear what you're saying,
Yeah, this is the
but
public.
getting back to
Yeah.
an employee handbook. And the truth is, would we ever know if
That
a
person
patron
carried.
walked in with a
No.
concealed weapon?
No.
No, we don't know.
No.
So we can't,
enforce it.
we can't,
But
There was a
by
enforcement.
putting that rule in place, if there ever was an incident in here, and an employee didn't bring their carry concealed because there was something in the book, I don't know whether you're putting yourself in a spot there.
are you saying that you think that we are liable for?
I'm just throwing it out
No,
there.
no, no, I wanna make sure I understand.
I don't think so, because a person's not liable to protect other people.
Exactly.
What
So,
other,
exactly.
what
That's
other
hard
place
for
of
that.
businesses allow a concealed weapon? You say at church, you go to church and someone has a
Only
concealed.
schools are not, as far as I.
By law, only
Offices,
schools are prohibited.
Courts.
Maybe, yeah, some other.
So anybody
Courts.
can work in the
Post
mall,
office.
I could be in retail and have a concealed
No,
weapon.
I think that, I mean, an organization or a business can pass whatever policy they want.
Yes.
Right.
A school, you cannot carry a concealed weapon on school grounds by
Right.
law, but we could decide anything we want.
I guess we're a school district library, I guess.
You know what, it doesn't,
No,
but
it's
we're
not.
not,
It's
we're
still
not a
separate.
school built, we're not we looked at that, we don't fit into the definition of a school building.
When this issue surfaced, I asked my friend Jeremy Johannesson, who is the director of NYLA, to do a little research. There has not been a gun shooting in a library
Thank goodness.
in the United States as far back as we can check. There have been people with knives. There was one famous incident in Florida when everybody beat feet out of the library because somebody had taken a book and dropped it, and it sounded like a gunshot. But that there have been no incidents in the United States, and as far as he could find out, of shootings in libraries. Not to say that it won't happen sometime, but this is the history now.
I just want to say that I'm against, I'm for the clause. And there just basically are two sorts of people. People who feel safer when there's a gun in their presence and people who feel less safe when there's a gun in their presence. And I have a lot of respect for law enforcement, but I note that law enforcement and military members also commit crimes with their guns. And having a gun in the room, I just heard that one of my neighbors has, weapons in his home, and I feel less safe because my neighbor has weapons in his home. And both viewpoints are responsible, and lots of people hold those viewpoints. That's all I'm gonna say is, I don't wanna go down, I think if we need a gun in the building, it should be on a uniformed, licensed person who's employed here.
I don't think we're saying that you need a gun in the building. I just feel like we're saying that, like, you don't wanna say in writing that, hey, you can't have a gun at all in the building.
Sure.
But we already said that. We've
The
already said
fewer
that. It's
guns
already
we
in the book.
have in the building, the fewer guns can go up and injure somebody.
That's my position.
So can we just add no weapons of any kind are permitted by an employee?
Yeah, I was gonna say employees are not permitted to possess weapons on the library premises.
That's fine too.
And then, Peter, we can always add to this.
We can change
So
it,
if-
I mean, that's the key thing, is that specifically.
And the second sentence, anyone aware of potential violation how
I
about,
think it's fine how it is, once we change the person.
okay?
Yeah.
So the first sentence is gonna say employees are not permitted to possess weapons on the library premises. And then we'll maintain the second sentence as it is.
Yes.
If there's a consensus on this board that, will make a motion, then this ends up being approved, and it gets passed, then this employee handbook is approved.
I make a motion to approve the employee handbook as amended.
And Jen, I'll make sure that you get the,
As amended
Seconded.
in section 28.1.
As amending 28.15 to read as just read.
okay, well, I'll make sure that you get that.
Okay, so Chris has made the motion to approve it with that amendment. Who was seconded it?
Carol.
Carol.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Okay,
we'll
let's
record
make sure we get
one
that.
opposition,
So we have, make sure you get that.
and then pass.
Pass.
Okay.
That's down here when you get done.
Herb, do you have anything you want to tell us about UHLS?
Yeah, I missed the meeting here because, well, I've had surgery twice in the last month, so I missed the meeting here. And I missed the meeting yesterday, but the meeting yesterday did not have a quorum, so nothing could be done at that meeting. We had a
That was
meeting.
a voluntary. Yesterday was a presentation.
No.
No, you mean
This is
UHLS.
Upper Hudson.
Oh, Upper Hudson.
Hudson, the Upper Hudson meeting was held yesterday. So, and there were a number of people who, could not come, so we didn't have a quorum, so they couldn't take any action.
I could say a little something about UHLS if you're done, Herb. So,
Sure.
As you noted in my report, I'm on the Automation Services Committee, I chair it at the UHLS, and there's a group, I'll try not to make this quick, but there's a group called the Central Library Advisory Council that spends about $150,000, if I remember the amount correctly, per year for the benefit of all of the libraries, based on a statute from the 1950s. And the Department of Library Development just changed their interpretation of that statute. And what Central Library has been doing is buying electronic books with that money over the last several years. And they're going to continue doing that. But I haven't prepped on this, but they decided that the Central Library Fund cannot buy any electronic fiction with this money. They have to buy nonfiction, because when the law was passed in the 50s, they only had print books, and it was specifically addressed to improve the nonfiction collections in the area. So there's an $80,000 hole in the amount of electronic fiction that used to be purchased every year by the Central Library Advisory Committee. So they've advised us to not purchase any nonfiction, because they've now got $80,000 extra dollars they can use for nonfiction. So we're not buying any electronic nonfiction. And they, I think Herb missed that meeting, but this week the Upper Hudson Library Board met, and I don't know yet if they approved this idea, but what they intend to do instead of... because they didn't meet.
No quorum.
Okay, thanks. No quorum. What they intend to do is they intend to buy an app and give it to all 29 libraries, and they intend to buy Ancestry.com and a couple of other large databases and licensed for all 29 libraries. So we should, by January 1st, be getting the app, assuming they approve it at their next meeting. And then we should be getting some of the databases we subscribe to paid for, which will then give us some money that we can use in other ways, presumably to buy electronic fiction, because a lot of people do use. There's the increase year over year is down to 17%. My other 2 years, it's been like 21 and 23% on the ebook usage. So people are using them more and more, and they move slowly just because of meeting schedules and so forth. But we have to figure out a way to buy all that fiction. So that's basically what's going on at UHLS relative to what I do here at the library.
Okay, thank you. You've already spoken about the construction grants.
I have.
Okay, so we have an add-on that Judy requested on board recruitment under new business.
I'd like us to think about board recruitment before May, or whenever petitions need to get signed, or in the event that even midterm there could be a vacancy for some reason. And I think that one of the responsibilities we have is to reach out to people who we think would be appropriate candidates for a board position. And as far as I know, the only requirement is that they have to be 18 years of age, and they have to be a resident of the school district. I think that there has to, as we know, there has to be a commitment to this organization, hopefully a passion for the library. I think that there, in the public, there might be a feeling that there has to be some kind of political affiliation. And I think that we need, as a board, to state that under no circumstances is this a political body. This is independent of any partisan politics. And no recruitment activity should be taken with regard to anyone's political affiliation. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how anyone else feels about it, but what I do feel really strongly about it is that that we need to communicate publicly somehow that we have made our decisions independent of politics. We make our decisions when it comes to any kind of input we have on board selection, independent of partisan politics, and we expect to do so in the future. And that's a commitment that I'm willing to make, and it's something I try to express to the public when I have a chance to express that. And I would just hope as a body we do the same. Because I think recruiting new board members who have a commitment to this organization and a passion for the library and who represents our diverse community is above and beyond the most important factors. So that's all I wanted to say about recruiting new board members.
And along those lines, I emailed someone that's a board member this week, and I'd like to discuss it in executive session. The content of that email.
You go ahead.
No, I totally agree with Judy. I've been on this board a long time, as many of you know, and throughout all those years, the board has really been apolitical. I did not know political affiliations of anybody for years. You know, sometimes when elections came around and people were running for office, then you would know, but the people that have served have always served with the intention of doing the best that they could to make this the best library for this community that the taxpayer could afford. And I would just hope that we maintain that tradition, because it is a community library. It isn't beholden to any particular wing or whatever, but we're just hoping to recruit the sincerest person who really wants to make this a very special place for a very special town. And I just hope, as I said, that we can maintain that tradition.
And personally, I'm proud of how the board has worked together
Me too. Me too.
over the time that I've been on it.
Me too. I've been on the board 4 years, and it's the most collegial board I've ever been on.
And I've been on for 3 years, and I have to say that although I suspect that I know that there are people on this board who have different political opinions or opinions about the social issues than I do, it's some of those very same people who I now regard as my friends and who I respect because of their integrity and because of their character and because in this context, their sole allegiance is to the best interests of this library. And politics have remained outside that door. There's been no seat at this table for partisan politics for the 3 years that I've been involved, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. And I just hope that it continues this way. And I bring this up because I left the house with the news on, and in this very, very fiery political season where you are bombarded with partisan politics, I was feeling very grateful to know that I was coming into this room
Safe haven.
and the politics were going to be left outside.
Amen.
So,
So,
yeah, definitely, this is the library.
Go ahead.
On a related, but not, I certainly agree with those who want to keep it nonpartisan. I just want to raise this question. I had lunch with a former board member when that person was a board member, and that board member expressed an opinion to me that it would be inappropriate for the library director to recruit people to run for the board. I subsequently bounced that off of some board members who didn't share the opinion of that previous board member. So I'm kind of looking for a clarification because I think that as good as this board is, it could be better. And I think it would be better if it had an accountant on it, regardless of the treasurer status. We have a lot of smart people, and we happen to have a lot of lawyers. But we just, and that's good to have a lot of lawyers, but we just don't have that financial expertise. And I personally think that all of us should be looking for accountants or CPAs or MBAs who'd like to join the board. So that's my take. I do want to ask if anybody knows legally whether I am allowed to recruit for the board.
I would just say, go for it, if you can.
Yeah.
We have been trying to recruit people,
It's
how many
very hard to
write-in
get
candidates
anywhere.
have we had, right?
The bottom line is that if a vacancy occurs because a term ends, it's the voters who decide.
Sure.
So,
Right.
but people won't get interested or understand what the position entails unless you and
Unless they're
we
invited, right?
do some outreach, so
come in contact with so many people
Right.
that you probably have a very good idea of who has a real concern for the library.
Right?
Well, I
That's
do
the
know,
bottom line right there.
I do know a
Yes.
couple of gentlemen who are in the financial field and who have young kids and who live in Gilderman. And I've asked them, generally when you have young kids, you have your priorities are somewhere else, Jason notwithstanding. But, and Peter, sorry. But,
Think more.
I want it to be okay for me to be out looking,
Yeah.
so.
Do we need a motion? Can we
No.
just say yes?
I'm fine without a motion, I just wanted to air it, just because I was surprised when that person said to me at lunch,
Yeah, I'm
that would be inappropriate. So,
Okay, if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to skip the minutes of the regular board meeting and do that later. Go right to public input session number 2. Is anybody here from the public wish to speak? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn and go into executive session.
You don't want to do the minutes?
No, I'll do when we come out. Yeah.
Okay, so we're adjourning to executive session, am I right?
Right.
Okay, who's making a motion to
I'll make
second?
the motion.
Peter's made the motion.
Peter?
Who's seconding it?
I'll second it.
Chris?
Okay.
All in
I
favor?
will,
Aye.
you and I will,
Yes, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.